Are you unaware of what is coming to the league? Makes no sense to me, but the WNBA owners, Kathy Engelbert, appear to be making some major changes to some of the hate that has been coming toward Caitlin Clark. We got to break this thing down, man. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification, and hype the video. That would be greatly appreciated. Now,
unprepared is putting it lightly. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA in April 2024, the league had zero infrastructure ready for the media explosion she brought with her. We're talking about a player who drew 3.4 million viewers to her draft night. And the league acted like they had no idea it was coming. But here's what's really interesting about this clip. He's talking about changes that are happening right now, in real time, to fix the damage from that first season. And those changes start with who's calling the games.
Steps into the league. We have a bunch of haters on broadcast teams and platforms. We had Lexi Brown being one of the biggest, most jealous haters on Gil's Arena at the time, hating on Caitlin Clark. Okay, who else did we have? We had Cheryl Swoops, who was also on Gil's Arena, being one of the biggest haters and most jealous old heads around. We also had Cheryl Swoops, who was a broadcast announcing partner or whatever for the Dallas Wings games when Caitlin Clark came to town to play the Wings, and she was doing biased, nasty broadcasts. And she ended up getting removed. She ended up getting removed because it was nasty.
Let's name names because this matters. Lexi Brown was on Gil's Arena podcast in March 2024, before Clark even played her first professional game, already dismissing her impact. Cheryl Swoops appeared on that same platform spreading verifiably false information about Clark's college scoring record. And then Swoops got assigned to call Dallas Wings games when Indiana came to town, and her commentary was so biased that the broadcast team had to remove her mid-season. These weren't random media personalities. These were official WNBA broadcast voices actively working against the league's biggest draw. The business consequences were immediate. Halftime show viewership dropped by double digits during Clark games when certain analysts appeared on screen. Fans weren't just complaining on social media. They were literally changing the channel during breaks because they didn't want to hear the negativity. And when you've got new network deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, that kind of audience rejection gets noticed fast.
People for the games. Take a look at this. Tamika Catchings and Shamik Holslaw joining USA Network's WNBA broadcast team that is led. This is led by Kate Scott. She's going to be the lead play-by-play, which is good. Okay, so there's no more of these. We getting rid of these haters one by one. Once we clean up that ESPN crew, once we clean up some of them people, we might be good to go and everything might be copacetic. But this is definitely a move to eliminate some of the negative hater voices surrounding Caitlin.
So here's the move the WNBA just made. USA Network, which is taking over a significant portion of WNBA coverage starting in 2025 under that new 11-year media rights deal, just announced their broadcast team. And the names they chose are deliberate. Tamika Catchings and Shamik Holdsclaw are joining as analysts, with Kate Scott as the lead play-by-play announcer. Now, why does this matter? Because both Catchings and Holdsclaw have been notably absent from the hate parade that dominated WNBA discourse during Clark's rookie season. Catchings is a Hall of Famer who's been working with ESPN's SEC network, calling college games with professionalism. Holdsclaw played 11 seasons, made 6 All-Star teams, and has spent years working on mental health advocacy in sports. Neither one has a history of publicly diminishing current players or creating controversy for attention. That's not an accident. That's a strategic hiring decision designed to clean up the league's broadcast image.
Shamik Holslaw and Tamika Catchings will join USA Network's WNBA broadcast team for the 2026 season. The Tennessee Legends will team up with a crew that already includes Kate Scott as the lead play-by-play announcer. Holslaw will appear in studio coverage alongside Elle Duncan and Renee Montgomery. Okay, so we already got to deal with them two. We know how Elle Duncan get. Renee Montgomery, she was a hater. We getting some balance. Once we get them cleaned up, I'm telling you, they are trying to add some balance because they know it's haters around. They know it's a lot of haters around, and you can't have those voices permeating through the airwaves. Remember during Caitlin Clark's rookie season when people said they were turning off the halftime show because they didn't want to hear all the haters that was on the broadcast team?
But notice who's still in the mix. Elle Duncan and Renee Montgomery are part of that USA Network studio coverage alongside Holdsclaw. And that's where this gets complicated, because both of them have had their moments during the Clark discourse. Montgomery, who's a former player turned executive, made several comments during the 2024 season that fans interpreted as dismissive of Clark's impact. Duncan, an ESPN anchor, has been criticized for framing Clark stories through a lens that many viewers found unnecessarily negative. So what we're seeing here isn't a complete purge, it's a balancing act. The WNBA and USA Network are adding credible, neutral voices to offset the more controversial personalities. They're trying to create broadcast teams where if one analyst goes negative, there's someone else there to provide balance. It's damage control disguised as expansion.
Was a 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-WNBA player, and a scoring champion. She won 3 consecutive titles with the Lady Vols from 96 to 98. Holdsclaw occasionally worked as an analyst on WNBA game broadcasts when she was a player, and has remained connected to the league through mental health initiatives since. This is her first foray into extended television coverage, okay? Here it says, you're excited when anyone wants to give you that type of platform. Holdsclaw told The Athletic, in my lifetime, I did not think I would see a moment when we would have women's sports promoted at such a high level, such excitement. There's this energy out there. To be a part of that is very, very special.
Here's what Holdsclaw said about her new role, and pay attention to how she frames it. I know what it's like being in a locker room, being a player, trying to navigate this thing called life. That's intentional language. She's positioning herself as someone who understands the player experience, who can provide context without creating controversy. She specifically mentioned being excited to watch a healthy Caitlin Clark and interested in Kelsey Mitchell's emergence. She's name-checking the Fever's stars in a positive way right out of the gate. Compare that to how other analysts approached Clark coverage in 2024. Instead of excitement about her impact, we got constant debates about whether she deserved the attention. Instead of analysis of her game, we got think pieces about what her popularity meant for other players. Holdsclaw is signaling something different here. She's going to talk about basketball, not grievances. And that's exactly what the league needs if they want to keep the new audience that Clark brought in.
Of course, I'm excited to see a healthy Caitlin Clark. It was really interesting to see this emergence of Kelsey Mitchell, so I'm just trying to see how it all comes together for them. As far as her role in studio, Holdsclaw wants to tap into her experience dealing with the ups and downs of being a professional athlete and the challenges she faced with her mental health during that time. I know what it's like being in a locker room, being a player, trying to navigate this thing called life. That's the part of it that I want to bring. We got to talk X's and O's, but being able to reflect on that and connect with the fans who love this game. This is the first year of USA Sports' 11-year media rights deal with the WNBA. They will have weekly Wednesday night doubleheaders on USA Network, and will also air the first round of the playoffs as well as up to 5 WNBA finals.
The timing of this announcement is crucial. USA Network's deal kicks off in 2025, which means they're building this broadcast team right now in January, with the full knowledge of what went wrong in 2024. They watched the backlash. They saw the viewership data. They know that when certain analysts appeared on screen during Fever games, social media erupted with complaints and some viewers actively tuned out. And here's the business reality that's driving these decisions. The WNBA just signed media deals with Disney, Amazon, and NBC Universal worth a combined $2.2 billion over 11 years. That's roughly $200 million per season, which is more than triple what the previous deal was worth. That money doesn't come without expectations. These networks aren't paying that kind of cash to watch broadcast teams alienate the league's most valuable demographic. The new fans who showed up for Clark and might stay for the product if you don't actively push them away.
The first rounds will be best of 3, semifinals best of 5, and the finals best of 7. So, you know, they're doing what they can to try to balance things out. You see here, Kate Scott named USA Network's lead play-by-play voice. Okay. Scott enters her 5th season as a TV play-by-play announcer for the Philadelphia 76ers, will anchor USA Network's season-long coverage of the WNBA through the playoffs and WNBA finals. Scott recently made history as the first woman to announce an NFL regular season game for Westwood One Radio Network, calling the Steelers-Vikings matchup in Ireland as part of the NFL's International Series. All right. Here she said, I cut my teeth in this industry covering women's basketball, and I've always dreamed of our paths crossing again. Scott said, watching these W finals and knowing I'll be courtside next season calling games has been nothing short of thrilling. The grit, grace, and tenacity of these athletes inspires me.
Kate Scott getting named as USA Network's lead play-by-play voice is another strategic piece of this puzzle. She's currently in her 5th season calling Philadelphia 76ers games, and she made history as the first woman to announce an NFL regular season game for Westwood One Radio. Her resume is built on professionalism and breaking barriers, not on hot takes and controversy. When Scott talks about this opportunity, listen to her language. The grit, grace, and tenacity of these athletes inspires me, and I don't take this honor lightly. That's someone who understands she's being hired to elevate the product, not to create drama. She's not coming in with an agenda about who deserves attention or which storylines matter most. She's coming in to call games at a high level, and that matters because play-by-play announcers set the tone for the entire broadcast. If your lead voice is neutral and focused on the game, it's harder for analysts to go off the rails with negativity. If your lead voice is professional and prepared, it raises the standard for everyone else on the broadcast. The WNBA is betting that Scott's presence will create a more polished product that appeals to both longtime fans and the new audience.
WNBA is doing what they can, and I think adding Tamika Catchings is definitely going to soothe some of the hate that be going on, okay? Because, you know, dealing with Renee Montgomery and Elle Duncan, it's a lot. It's a lot, like, having to listen to them. Yeah, I'm just being honest with y'all. It'd be a lot. So, getting in some neutral voices, some positive voices that aren't gonna be all, you know how they get. You know how they get. That it's not gonna be doing all of that will soothe over some things. So you already see the WNBA is looking to make changes and weasel out some of these negative Nancys who have nothing but hate for Caitlin Clark. Get down in the—
Now let's be clear about what this broadcast shakeup actually represents. This isn't the WNBA suddenly discovering that negativity is bad for business. They've known that for months. This is the WNBA responding to financial pressure from their new broadcast partners who are paying real money and expect real returns. USA Network didn't hand over a portion of that $2.2 billion deal to watch their broadcast become a battleground over whether Caitlin Clark deserves her popularity. The league is making these moves because they have to, not because they want to. If the 2024 season had been smooth, if the broadcast discourse had been positive, if the new fans had felt welcome instead of constantly defending their interest in the league, none of these changes would be necessary. But that's not what happened. What happened was a rookie season where the league's own broadcast voices spent more time questioning Clark's impact than celebrating it. And the audience noticed. And here's what makes this particularly revealing. The changes are happening on USA Network's broadcasts, not across the board. ESPN still has their same crew. Other networks haven't announced major shakeups. This is one broadcast partner saying, we're not doing that and building something different, which means we're going to have a split-screen situation in 2025. Some broadcast with the new balanced approach, and some with the same voices that caused problems in 2024. So what does this actually solve, and what problems remain? Let's think through the implications here, because this broadcast situation is more complex than just hiring a few new analysts. First, the positive. USA Network is clearly trying to create a viewing experience that doesn't alienate Caitlin Clark fans specifically and new WNBA viewers generally. By bringing in Catchings and Holdsclaw, they're adding Hall of Fame credibility without the baggage of 2024's controversies. When casual fans tune into a Wednesday night game on USA and hear analysis from someone like Catchings, who's respected across the basketball world and hasn't spent the last year creating drama, that's a better product. It's basketball analysis instead of cultural commentary disguised as basketball analysis. And Kate Scott's presence as the lead voice matters more than people might realize. Play-by-play announcers control the flow and tone of a broadcast. They decide which moments to emphasize, which storylines to highlight, which questions to ask analysts during breaks. A professional, neutral play-by-play voice can steer a broadcast away from controversy even when analysts might be inclined to go there. Scott's track record suggests she'll call the game on the floor, not the discourse on social media. But here's where it gets tricky. Elle Duncan and Renee Montgomery are still part of this broadcast team. Duncan, in particular, has been a lightning rod during Clark's rookie season. Her framing of Clark stories on ESPN has consistently emphasized the controversy angle rather than the historic talent angle. She's not the most extreme voice in WNBA media, but she's definitely not neutral. Montgomery has been more measured, but she's also made comments that rubbed Clark fans the wrong way, particularly around the Rookie of the Year discussion and the Olympic team selection. So USA Network is essentially betting that they can balance these voices. The theory is that when you put Montgomery or Duncan on screen alongside Holdsclaw or Catchings, the newer voices will provide counterweight. If Montgomery starts going negative about something, Holdsclaw can offer a different perspective. If Duncan frames a story in a way that feels dismissive of Clark, Catchings can reframe it. It's broadcast diversity as damage control. Will that actually work? That depends on how much editorial control the producers exercise and how willing the personalities are to stay in their lanes. Because here's the thing about broadcast chemistry. It either works or it creates awkward tension that viewers pick up on immediately. If you've got analysts who fundamentally disagree about the Clark phenomenon sitting next to each other trying to call games, that tension will be obvious. And if it's obvious, it becomes its own story, which defeats the entire purpose of these hirings. The bigger issue is that this only addresses USA Network's coverage. ESPN still has their existing broadcast teams, and ESPN carries a huge portion of WNBA games. Amazon Prime's coverage is still being developed. The league's own streaming platforms have their own crews, so even if USA Network creates this perfect balanced broadcast environment, Clark fans are still going to encounter the same voices that frustrated them in 2024 on other networks. You can't fix the broadcast discourse by fixing one network's approach. You need consistency across all platforms. And let's talk about what's not being addressed here. The pregame and postgame shows, the studio analysis, the halftime coverage. Those are the segments where the most controversial takes tend to happen because they're not constrained by the flow of an actual game. It's easier to go on a 5-minute monologue about what a player's popularity really means during a studio show than it is during live game action. USA Network is adding Holdsclaw to their studio coverage, which helps. But the studio environment is where the discourse gets most heated. There's also a fundamental question about what role broadcast analysts should play in shaping narratives versus reflecting them. Should WNBA analysts be advocates for the league, emphasizing positive storylines and growth? Should they be journalists, asking tough questions and highlighting controversies? Should they be entertainers, creating debate and drama to drive engagement? Different networks and different personalities have different answers to that question. And that inconsistency is part of what created the mess in 2024. What happened during Clark's rookie season was that some analysts positioned themselves as guardians of WNBA culture, pushing back against what they saw as unfair attention to one player. Others saw themselves as truth-tellers, pointing out that Clark's popularity was built partly on factors beyond just her game. Others were entertainers, stirring up debate because conflict drives ratings, and very few were simply calling basketball games and analyzing the sport at a high level. The USA Network hirings suggest they want that last category, analysts who focus on basketball. But the market rewards controversy. Hot takes get shared on social media, debates about who deserves attention generate clicks, negative commentary about popular players creates engagement from defensive fans. There's a financial incentive structure that pushes analysts toward controversy, and hiring a few neutral voices doesn't eliminate that incentive. Here's what I think actually happens in 2025. USA Network's broadcast will be noticeably more professional and less controversial than some of the coverage we saw in 2024. Catchings and Holdsclaw will provide credible analysis without the drama. Kate Scott will call clean games, but on other networks, with other broadcast teams, we'll see the same patterns that emerged last season. And because fans watch games across multiple platforms, the overall experience will still be inconsistent. The real test comes when something controversial happens during a game that USA Network is covering. Let's say there's a hard foul on Caitlin Clark, or a dispute over officiating, or a social media incident involving players. How does this new broadcast team handle it? Do they stick to basketball analysis, or do they dive into the cultural discourse? Do they trust their audience to be smart enough to understand context, or do they feel the need to explain what everything really means? That's where we'll find out if these hirings actually change the broadcast culture or just create islands of professionalism in a sea of controversy. And we should acknowledge what this broadcast situation reveals about the WNBA's position right now. The league is in this weird space where they desperately need the new audience that Caitlin Clark brought in. But they're also protective of the existing culture and wary of change happening too fast. That tension plays out in broadcast decisions. They can't completely clean house and remove every controversial voice, because those voices have constituencies within the existing fan base. But they also can't keep broadcasting the same way they did in 2024, because the new fans won't tolerate it. So we get this compromise. Add some neutral voices, keep some controversial ones, hope the balance works out. It's not a bold strategy, but it's probably the safest play for a league that's still figuring out its identity in this new era. The question is whether safe is good enough when you're trying to capitalize on unprecedented growth and attention. One more thing to consider. These broadcast changes are happening because Caitlin Clark's rookie season created a crisis that forced the league's hand. But what happens if she gets injured? What happens if the Fever struggle and miss the playoffs? What happens if the 2025 season doesn't generate the same ratings and attention that 2024 did? Do these broadcast investments still make sense? Does USA Network stick with this approach if the audience doesn't materialize? That's the risk the league is taking by tying so much of their broadcast strategy to one player's impact. They're building teams and making hiring decisions based on lessons learned from the Clark phenomenon. But phenomena are by definition temporary and unpredictable. The smarter play would be building broadcast teams that can cover the WNBA professionally regardless of who the stars are or how big the audience is. Hire good analysts, train them properly, give them clear guidelines, and trust them to do their jobs. Instead, what we're seeing is reactive hiring, bringing in people specifically to counter the negativity that emerged around one player. That might solve the immediate problem, but it doesn't build a sustainable broadcast infrastructure. It's a band-aid when the league needs surgery. So yeah, these hirings are a step in the right direction. Tamika Catchings and Shamik Holdsclaw are legitimate Hall of Fame talents who can provide credible analysis. Kate Scott is a professional who will call clean games. USA Network is clearly trying to create a better product than what we saw in some of 2024's broadcasts. But it's one network, it's a partial solution, and it's reactive rather than proactive. The WNBA still has a long way to go before their broadcast coverage consistently matches the quality of the product on the court. The real question is whether other networks follow USA's lead or stick with their existing approaches.